The pyrite vein shimmered, a false promise of gold in the shale's dull embrace. I traced its jagged edges with a geologist's hammer, the metallic clang echoing faintly against the mine's oppressive silence. Routine. That's what I clung to. Each measured strike, each precise notation in my ledger, a bulwark against the encroaching chaos. The thunderstorm outside hammered against the rock, a relentless percussion against the grinding teeth of the ore-processing machinery. Whir, scrape, thump. It was a mechanical heartbeat, cold and indifferent. My fingers, stiff with the damp chill, registered the rough texture of the shale, the subtle variations in its composition. I've always found solace in the tangible, the quantifiable. A surgeon's mind demands order, even when the world offers only entropy. Here, deep within the Blackwater Mine, entropy was a palpable thing. A boy, no older than 14, materialized from the gloom of the tunnel entrance. He clutched a package wrapped in oilcloth, his face pale and slick with sweat. He didn't speak, just thrust the package toward me, his eyes wide with a terror that felt manufactured. "For you, Doctor," he finally mumbled, the words swallowed by the echoing machinery. He backed away, a hasty retreat into the darkness. They say the deep ones are restless. Superstition. It clung to this region like the perpetual mist. I dismissed his words with a curt nod. The deep ones. A local fabrication to explain the mine's history of collapses and disappearances. Fear breeds stories, stories breed fear. The package felt unnervingly warm. I laid it on the rough-hewn table, the oilcloth smelling faintly of mildew and something else. Something acrid. Carefully, I unwrapped it. Moss, thick and vibrant green, clung to the contents. Beneath the moss, it pulsed, a slow, rhythmic throb that resonated in my chest. It was an organ. A fleshy mass, vaguely spherical, crisscrossed with veins that pulsed with a sickly luminescence. The smell hit me then, sharp and overwhelming, copper and fresh blood. A metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat. The vision came without warning. A fleeting panorama of subterranean chambers, lit by an unnatural, phosphorescent glow. Figures draped in shadow chanting in a language I didn't understand yet felt imprinted on my very bones. The air thick with the scent of damp earth and something. Ancient. It lasted only a heartbeat, but when I blinked, the mine felt subtly different. The grinding machinery seemed louder, the shadows deeper. The cat watched from the corner. A stray, I'd taken to calling it. Its fur was the color of coal dust, its eyes mismatched 21 emerald green, the other a startling icy blue. It never seemed to react to the mine's peculiarities, the tremors, the unsettling noises. It simply observed, a silent, inscrutable witness. It hadn't flinched at the organ, hadn't recoiled from the smell. Just watched. I retrieved my scalpel, the familiar weight reassuring in my hand. I needed to document this, to categorize it, to apply the principles of rational inquiry to this anomaly. I began to sketch, meticulously detailing the organ's structure, its color, its texture. The pulsing continued, a slow, insistent rhythm against the backdrop of the storm. Whir, scrape, thump. A faint, almost imperceptible chanting drifted from the deeper tunnels, a low, guttural drone that vibrated in the floorboards. I attributed it to the wind, a trick of the acoustics. My hand trembled slightly as I recorded the organ's estimated volume. The copper scent intensified, making my head swim. I needed to analyze the cellular structure, determine its origin. Was it animal, plant, something else? The ledger lay open, a stark white canvas against the gloom. Each entry, a desperate attempt to impose order on the inexplicable. I dipped my pen in the inkwell, the scratching sound a fragile counterpoint to the mine's relentless symphony of decay. The cat let out a low, guttural hiss, staring directly at the pulsating organ. The organ pulsed, a slow, sickening rhythm that seemed to resonate not just in my chest, but in the very shale of the mine copper. The smell was almost tangible now, clinging to the inside of my nostrils, a metallic tang that threatened to overwhelm the scent of mildew and damp earth. I had to understand it, to categorize, to dissect the anomaly into manageable pieces. Bronwyn Nguyen, disgraced surgeon, found solace in the dissection of the inexplicable. My ledger lay open, the stark white pages a defiant contrast to the encroaching darkness. I began with the basics: cellular structure, density, vascularization. The scalpel felt cold and precise in my hand, each incision a small act of defiance against the rising tide of unease. The organ's surface was slick, almost oily, resisting the blade's edge. So scritch, scrape, whir. The machinery's relentless pulse seemed to mock my efforts. I cross-referenced the organ's properties with the geological surveys I'd conducted over the years. The pyrite vein, the shale composition, the subterranean water table, all meticulously documented. A pattern began to emerge. The organ's location corresponded precisely with a previously unmapped fault line, a geological anomaly I dismissed as insignificant. A tremor, barely perceptible, ran through the mine, rattling the tools on the table. Thump. The scent of copper intensified, localized to a point directly beneath the table. It was illogical. Impossible. I ran a gloved hand along the shale floor, feeling for inconsistencies, a slight depression, a subtle shift in the rock's texture. I struck the ground with my hammer, the metallic clang echoing strangely. A hollow sound. A section of the shale floor gave way with a groan, revealing a dark, descending passage. It hadn't been there before, or perhaps I had simply been blind to it. The cat, its mismatched eyes gleaming in the gloom, slipped into the passage without hesitation. A silent invitation. I followed, my scalpel held ready. The passage opened into a chamber unlike any I had encountered in the mine. Ornate carvings adorned the walls, depicting scenes of unsettling ritual. Figures draped in shadow, their faces obscured by elaborate masks. The air hung heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something ancient and indefinable, and then I saw it. A clock. Not a miner's timepiece, not a utilitarian instrument of measurement. This was something else entirely, ornate, crafted from blackened brass, and what appeared to be polished bone. Its face was obscured by a layer of grime, but the numbers were visible beneath, etched in a script I didn't recognize. The ticking was insistent. Tick, tick, tick. It was a chronometer of dust, I realized, recalling fragmented legends whispered by the miners. A device said to measure not time, but something else. Something far more sinister. I wiped the grime from the face, revealing the numbers. They were counting down. The vision returned, sharper this time. The chanting, the figures, the phosphorescent glow schwa, all coalescing into a terrifying clarity. I recognized the symbols carved into the walls, the masks worn by the figures. They weren't random. They were deliberate. I reached for my charcoal and paper, compelled to record what I saw. My hand trembled as I began to sketch the cult symbol, a serpentine figure coiled around a stylized representation of the organ. The ticking of the clock seemed to accelerate, a frantic pulse against the backdrop of the mine's relentless machinery. Tick, tick, tick. It was no longer a subtle rhythm. It was a countdown, a warning. The cat rubbed against my leg, a low purr rumbling in its chest. It wasn't observing anymore. It was guiding, leading me deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the mine. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, a certainty that I was no longer in control. The ledger lay forgotten on the floor, its pristine pages a testament to a naivety I could no longer afford. The copper scent intensified, a suffocating wave that threatened to drown me. The clock's ticking sped up noticeably, a frantic, accelerating pulse. A tick, tick, tick. The dreams returned, a slurry of surgical steel and chanting shadows. I saw the faces of patients, their expressions contorted in silent screams, superimposed over the masked figures from the chamber. Each failure, each miscalculation, replayed with agonizing clarity. I woke with a gasp, the mine's oppressive silence a stark contrast to the cacophony in my head. Drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed from the unseen depths, a metronome marking the passage of a dread I couldn't name. My hand instinctively reached for the charcoal and paper scattered across the table. I hadn't been sketching yet. There they were, crude, frantic depictions of the mine's layout, interwoven with unsettling diagrams. Ritualistic circles filled with symbols I didn't recognize yet. Felt I should. The serpentine figure coiled around the stylized organ appeared again, rendered with a disturbing familiarity. How? My memory was a ledger of precise observations, not fevered imaginings. I attempted to reconcile the sketches with my own meticulous maps. The tunnels seemed different. A passage I'd charted as a straight line now curved unexpectedly. A chamber I'd measured as 20 feet wide appeared to have narrowed, the shale walls pressing inward. The mine itself was shifting, breathing. It was an unsettling defiance of geological certainty. The cat watched me, its mismatched glass eyes reflecting the flickering lamplight. It wasn't the detached observation of a creature accustomed to its surroundings. There was a purpose in its gaze, a subtle urging. It nudged my leg, then turned and padded towards a previously unexplored section of the tunnel, a silent summons. I followed, my boots crunching on loose shale. Scritch, scrape. The sound amplified in the oppressive silence. The scent of copper intensified, a metallic wave that slammed into my senses, blurring my vision. My stomach churned, a cold knot tightening in my gut. I stumbled, bracing myself against the damp wall. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of something ancient and unseen. I felt a disorientation, a sense of being adrift in a sea of shadows. My hand trembled as I unfolded a fresh sheet of paper, compelled to document the instability. The sketches seemed to flow from my fingertips, guided by a force beyond my control. I drew the shifting tunnels, the distorted chambers, the unsettling symbols. It was an act of desperate documentation, a futile attempt to impose order on a chaotic reality. Drip, 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 drip. The water echoed, a constant reminder of the claustrophobia closing in. The cat stopped before a section of the rock face, its tail twitching impatiently. It pressed its head against the cold stone, emitting a low, insistent purr. I approached cautiously, running my gloved hand along the shale. It felt different, smoother than the surrounding rock, almost polished. I struck it with my hammer, the sound muffled, almost absorbed by the stone. Thud. A hollow resonance. I examined the area more closely, my scalpel tracing the contours of the rock face. There was a seam, a subtle line where the shale appeared to have been carefully carved. I pressed against the stone, feeling for a give. A click, a grinding sound. Gigra. The rock face slid inward, revealing a doorway carved directly into the stone. A blast of cold, moist air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of something indescribably ancient. It tasted of decay and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. The ticking of the chronometer of dust seemed to accelerate, a frantic pulse in the suffocating darkness. Sephon, tick, tick, tick. Tick. The cat slipped through the doorway without hesitation, its mismatched eyes gleaming in the gloom. It paused, looking back at me, an almost expectant gaze. The copper smell was overwhelming now, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother me. I stepped across the threshold. The doorway sealed behind me with another grinding shudder. Gira. Extinguishing the meager light from my lamp. The cat vanished into the absolute blackness. A coldness far deeper than the mind's usual damp chill pressed against my skin. I fumbled for my lamp, the flint striking with a hesitant twinchink, the flame sputtering to life, casting a sickly yellow glow. The tunnel beyond was unlike any I'd charted. The shale walls weren't rough-hewn, but smoothed, almost polished, as if shaped by deliberate hands. And then I saw them. Veins, not of coal or quartz, but something else entirely. They ran through the rock like capillaries, shimmering with an internal light, suffida, sickly pulsating luminescence. The color was wrong too, not the dull gray of iron, but a deep, arterial red, laced with streaks of sickly green, a mockery of biological structures within the stone. My hand trembled as I raised my lamp, the light dancing across the veins. They pulsed, a slow, deliberate rhythm that resonated deep within my chest. Hum. A low, resonant vibration filled the tunnel, a physical sensation more than a sound. It felt like the mind itself was breathing. The chronometer of dust, clipped to my waistcoat, began to tick faster. A frantic souven tick, 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 tick. That grated against my nerves. Images flooded my mind, unbidden, unwelcome. The operating theater, the sterile smell of carbolic acid, the frantic pulse of a patient under anesthesia, the tremor in my hand, the scalpel slipping, the crimson bloom spreading across the linen. Each failure, each miscalculation, replayed with agonizing clarity. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the rising tide of panic. Mu focus, observe. I forced myself to breathe, to ground myself in the tangible reality of the tunnel. I produced my scalpel, carefully scraping a sample from one of the veins. The mineral crumbled easily, a fine, reddish dust clinging to my fingers. I examined it under the lamplight, noting its crystalline structure, hematite. But the color, the luminescence, it defied explanation. The smell intensified too. That coppery tang now mixed with something else, danditipine, a metallic sweetness that turned my stomach. The cat's absence was a palpable weight. It hadn't made a sound. No rustle of fur, no click of claws on stone. Just gone. I felt a creeping unease, a sense of being watched. Not by something tiving the tunnel, but something tiving behind me. I spun around, my lamp casting frantic shadows that danced across the walls. Nothing. Only the pulsing veins, the relentless stivon hum. I forced myself to continue documenting, meticulously recording the mineral composition, the dimensions of the tunnel, the strange, pulsating light. I sketched the veins in my notebook, the lines blurring with my trembling hand. It was a futile exercise, a desperate attempt to impose order on a reality that was rapidly dissolving into chaos. My carefully constructed routine, my meticulous observations were crumbling around me. I paused, wiping the sweat from my brow. My reflection stared back at me from a shallow puddle that had formed on the tunnel floor. It was distorted, fragmented by the ripples. And then, for a fraction of a second, I saw something else. A figure, cloaked, robed, standing directly behind me. The image was fleeting, indistinct, swallowed by the shadows. I whirled around, lamp raised, heart pounding against my ribs. Nothing. Only the pulsing veins, the relentless fine hum, and the accelerated ticking of the chronometer of dust. Tick, 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 tick. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light, a phantom born of fatigue and dread. But the coppery smell was stronger now, clinging to the back of my throat. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. I wasn't alone. The disorientation hit me suddenly, a wave of nausea and a blankness where memory should have been. One moment I was examining the sketch of the veins, the next I was standing in a different part of the tunnel, the lamp's sickly light revealing a wall I didn't recognize. Whir, grind, the sound of distant machinery, or perhaps the mine settling, echoed around me. I blinked, trying to orient myself, the chronometer of dust hammering against my ribs with a frantic funarin tick, tick, tick. My hand instinctively went to my head, a dull ache throbbing behind my eyes. Where was I going? What was I doing? The questions spiraled, each one unanswered, each one adding to the rising panic I felt. Adrift, like a surgical sponge, discarded and forgotten. I stumbled back, my boots scraping against the shale floor, the sound oddly loud in the oppressive silence. Then I saw them, my instruments, laid out on the ground, arranged with a disturbing precision. Scalpel, forceps, bone saw twin gleaming dully in the lamplight. They formed a circle, almost a ritualistic arrangement. I didn't place them. I wouldn't. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. My breath hitched in my throat, a dry, rasping sound. Hiss, and the wind seemed to snake through the cracks in the rock, a mournful sigh. I knelt, my fingers tracing the polished steel of the scalpel. The coldness seeped into my bones. It felt wrong. I remembered the operating theater, the sterile smell of carbolic acid, the precise movements, the delicate balance between life and death. But this felt like a mockery of that skill, a perversion. The coppery smell intensified, thickened, cloying in my nostrils. A violent cough seized me, racking my body. Hack, cough. Wheeze, the taste of blood filled my mouth. The cat materialized then, a silent shadow weaving through the lamplight. Its mismatched glass eyes glinted, reflecting the sickly yellow glow. It turned, its tail twitching, and began to move towards the chronometer. An insistent tug pulled at my mind, a subtle pressure guiding my steps. I resisted, trying to fight the compulsion, but the force was too strong. My legs moved against my will, drawn towards the ticking clock. Futik, tick, tick. Each pulse of the chronometer felt like a hammer blow against my sanity. I tried to recall the events leading up to this moment, but the memories were fragmented, like shards of glass. I remembered the veins, the pulsing light, the sketch in my notebook. But there were gaps, vast chasms of nothingness. Was I losing my mind, or was something else at play? Something manipulating my memories, controlling my actions. The thought was terrifying, yet it resonated with a chilling logic. The cat stopped before the chronometer, its gaze fixed on the swirling hands. It let out a soft imero, a sound that seemed to echo in the depths of my mind. I looked down at the clock. The numbers blurred, swam before my eyes. The coppery smell was overwhelming now, suffocating. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The air grew heavy, pressing down on me. I stumbled back, clutching my head, desperate to regain control. I needed to document this, to record my observations, to preserve some semblance of sanity. I reached for my journal, my hand trembling. The pages were filled with my meticulous notes, my sketches of the veins, my observations of the mine. But there were gaps, too. Pages torn out, passages crossed out, as if someone twenty benti or something twend was trying to erase my memories. The cat rubbed against my leg, a soft, insistent pressure. It wanted me to move, to follow. I fought against the compulsion, but the pull was too strong. My feet carried me forward towards the darkness, towards whatever awaited me. The chronometer ticked on, relentlessly counting down. Tick, 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 tick. The rustling of cloth, faint but distinct, echoed in my ears, a whisper in the darkness. I stopped, my hand hovering over the journal. A neatly folded note had been tucked between the pages. I unfolded it, my fingers trembling. The paper was thin, almost translucent. A single word was scrawled across it in elegant script. Join. The note felt slick against my palm, the script mocking in its elegance. Join. A single word, a command, a promise, or a threat. I swallowed, the coppery taste clinging to the back of my throat. The cat, a silent, watchful sentinel, nudged my leg again, a persistent, almost impatient pressure. I looked past it, into the darkness beyond the lamplight. The tunnel hadn't ended, it had merely opened into something larger. The chronometer hammered against my ribs. Tick, tick, tick. A frantic pulse mirroring the rising dread in my chest. I took a breath, the air thick and heavy, tasting of damp earth and something else. Something metallic, copper. The smell intensified as I stepped forward, drawn by an invisible thread. The cat flowed ahead, a dark shadow disappearing into the gloom. The tunnel widened, abruptly and impossibly, into a cavern of colossal proportions. The lamplight struggled to penetrate the vastness, revealing only fragments of the space. Then, a soft, ethereal glow began to illuminate the scene. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls and ceiling, pulsing with a sickly green light, casting dancing, distorted shadows that writhed like living things. Savin chirp, chirp, chirp. A chorus of unseen insects filled the air, a subtle, unsettling symphony. The scale of the cavern was breathtaking and utterly terrifying. It dwarfed anything I'd previously mapped, anything I'd believed possible within the mine's structure. The shale floor transitioned into a damp, muddy expanse, slick under my boots. Each step released a soft tavern twelch, a morbid counterpoint to the relentless ticking of the chronometer. Tick, tick, tick. I fumbled for my journal, desperate to record this discovery, to anchor myself to reality. The pages felt strangely damp, the paper yielding under my touch. I uncapped my ink pot, but the ink bled instantly, blurring the page into an indecipherable mess. I tried again and again, the same frustrating result. The ink simply wouldn't hold. My hand trembled. The scalpel cold memory of the operating theater, a phantom ache in my fingers. My memories felt distant, hazy. Like looking at a faded photograph, the details blurred, the colors muted. The operating theater, my patients, my colleagues. Were they real? Or were they fabrications, implanted memories designed to mislead me? The thought was a chilling echo in the cavern's vastness. Fufuti. Hiss. The wind, or something mimicking it, snaked through the cavern, a mournful whisper against the fungal glow. The cat reappeared, its mismatched glass eyes reflecting the eerie light. It emitted a low fimero, a sound that seemed to vibrate within my skull. It circled, then settled, its gaze fixed on a point deeper within the cavern. A compulsion stronger than before tugged at my mind, urging me onward. I fought it, but the resistance felt futile. My limbs moved with a detached obedience, carrying me towards the darkness. The air grew heavier, the coppery smell almost suffocating. I coughed, a dry rasping sound, and tasted blood. The chronometer's ticking accelerated, a frantic drumbeat against my skull. Tick, tick, tick. The numbers swam before my eyes, blurring into an indistinguishable mass. The hours dwindled, the minutes evaporated. I stumbled, catching myself on a damp, moss-covered wall. The fungi pulsed, their light intensifying, revealing a sight that froze the blood in my veins. Etched into the cavern floor directly in front of me was a symbol, a complex arrangement of lines and angles, unfamiliar yet instinctively repulsive. It was rendered in what appeared to be fresh blood, the crimson liquid still glistening in the fungal light. The metallic scent intensified, overwhelming, sickening. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The insects seemed to amplify the silence, a mocking chorus to the horror unfolding before me. I stared, transfixed, unable to tear my gaze away. The chronometer ticked, relentlessly counting down. A tick, tick, tick. The symbol pulsed, a mockery of order etched into chaos. The crimson lines seemed to writhe, to breathe. Tick, 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 tick. The chronometer's insistence was a physical pressure, a vice tightening around my skull, the robed figures. They weren't visual distortions, not mere hallucinations born of exhaustion and dread. They were reflections, glimpses of something layered beneath the present, superimposed upon the cavern's fungal glow. A flicker of a cowl, the glint of something metallic beneath a sleeve, the briefest impression of a face, or rather, the absence of one. My breath hitched, a strangled sound swallowed by the cavern's immensity. The geological formations. Shale, limestone veins of quartz. They weren't unfamiliar. They resonated with a buried memory, a sense of recognition so profound it felt like a phantom limb, aching. A childhood home, a forgotten playground. The image remained just beyond reach, tantalizingly close, then dissolving into the oppressive darkness. Hiss and hiss. The wind, or whatever mimicked it, seemed to mock my struggle, a chilling whisper against the pulsing fungi. The cat, a black silhouette against the sickly green light, positioned itself directly in my path. It wasn't a playful block, but a deliberate barrier. A low, mournful merow emanated from its throat, a sound that resonated with a peculiar sadness. It wasn't the sound of a cat, not entirely. It was something else, a lament, a warning, a plea. The glass eyes, mismatched and unsettling, seemed to bore into my soul, reflecting not light, but a profound and ancient sorrow. The compulsion intensified. The pull towards the cavern's center was no longer a subtle urging. It was a physical force, a current dragging me forward. I planted my feet, digging my heels into the slick mud, fighting against the tide. The effort was futile. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected as if controlled by an unseen puppeteer. The scalpel-cold memory of the operating theater returned, sharper now, more vivid. The sterile scent of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the weight of responsibility, it all felt distant, unreal. A strange empathy began to bloom within me, a disconcerting warmth spreading through my chest. It wasn't a feeling of understanding, but of connection. A resonance with the entities that resided within this place. They weren't malevolent, not inherently. They were lost, trapped, yearning. The logic of my former life, the scientific rigor, the detached observation began to crumble. The world fractured into a kaleidoscope of distorted perceptions. The cavern's silence amplified the ticking of the chronometer, a relentless countdown to an unknown doom. Tick, tick, tick. My vision blurred, the fungal light intensifying, swirling into a vortex of green and shadow. The symbol on the floor seemed to rise, to detach itself from the stone, to become a gateway. A voice echoed within my mind, not through my ears, but directly into my consciousness. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, a resonance, a vibration. It was ancient, powerful, and undeniably familiar. The coppery scent intensified, overwhelming, choking. "You are one of us." The words resonated not as a sentence, but as a statement of fact. A truth already known, buried deep within my subconscious. The cat stepped aside, no longer a barrier, but a guide. The compulsion surged, irresistible now. My legs moved forward, carrying me towards the darkness, towards the symbol, towards something else. The chronometer ticked, its numbers blurring into an indistinguishable stream of light. Tick, tick, tick. The final ticks resonated, each one a hammer blow against my skull. The cavern pulsed, the fungal light intensifying until it bleached the shadows into a sickly, luminous green. The air thickened, heavy with a coppery tang, now laced with something else. A cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. The chronometer's face, once a chaotic swirl of numbers, now displayed a single, unwavering 0. They materialized not as fleeting glimpses this time, but as solid forms. The robed figures, their faces previously obscured, were now visible. Not beautiful, not grotesque, but empty, smooth, pale skin stretched taut over bone, the eyes dark and vacant, reflecting the fungal glow like polished obsidian. A chilling serenity emanated from them, a stillness that felt profoundly unnatural. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The drums began, a slow, deliberate beat that vibrated through the cavern floor, through my bones. "Welcome, Bronwyn Nguyen," the leader's voice resonated, a baritone that seemed to bypass my ears and enter directly into my mind. It wasn't a sound precisely, but a pressure, a vibration that rattled my teeth. "We have been expecting you." My breath hitched. I tried to speak, to formulate a denial, a challenge, but the words caught in my throat, strangled by a sudden, inexplicable weakness. The cavern seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in, the fungal light searing my eyes. My surgical instruments, scattered on the cavern floor, glinted mockingly. A phantom scent of antiseptic briefly masked the coppery sweetness, a desperate echo of a life I no longer recognized. "You misunderstand," I managed, the voice raspy and unfamiliar. "I am not expecting anything." The leader's lips curved into a parody of a smile. "You are mistaken about your own history, Doctor, about your place in the tapestry of time." He gestured, and the other figures parted, revealing a raised platform constructed from the same black shale as the cavern walls. Upon it lay a figure shrouded in shadow, but undeniably human, or at least furthermost a human. "We are the inheritors," the leader continued, his voice unwavering. "The guardians of what lies beneath. We have existed here, woven into the very fabric of this place, long before your modernity." He paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his vacant eyes. "This mine is not merely a hole in the earth, Doctor. It is a nexus, a conduit." The drums intensified, their rhythm accelerating, a relentless pulse that mirrored the pounding in my head. Thrum, thrum, thrum. A memory surfaced unbidden, a lecture on geological strata, the layers of time revealed in the rock face. The mine wasn't just a hole, it was a window. A window into what? The thought dissolved into a wave of nausea. You possess a gift, Bronwyn Nguyen, the leader said, his voice now laced with a subtle, almost hypnotic cadence. A skill. A precision that transcends mere technique. We require it. He stepped closer, and I could see the fine lines etched around his eyes, the subtle discoloration of his skin. He wasn't old, not in the conventional sense, but he carried the weight of centuries in his gaze. We have a patient, a necessary contribution to the preservation of our work. The shrouded figure on the platform shifted, a muffled groan escaping its lips. The coppery scent intensified, overwhelming, suffocating. I fought against the rising panic, clinging to the vestiges of my former self, the surgeon who prided himself on his rationality, his detachment. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The leader's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too perfect, too sharp. He reached into a pouch at his side and produced a scalpel. The blade gleamed unnaturally in the fungal light, reflecting the pulsing green glow. It wasn't steel, I realized with a jolt of visceral horror. It was something else, something organic. "A simple extraction, doctor," he said, extending the scalpel towards me, "a gift of understanding." A joining. The drums reached a fever pitch. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The fungal light pulsed, bathing the cavern in an unsettling, rhythmic glow. The scalpel's edge seemed to beckon, promising knowledge, promising oblivion. The scalpel's edge shimmered, a predatory gleam in the fungal light. "A joining," the leader repeated, the cadence of his voice a tightening noose around my mind. My stomach churned, the coppery sweetness now a physical weight pressing down on my lungs. No, I wouldn't. I couldn't. The memory of Elias Thorne surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. A young boy, barely 10, brought into the operating room with a congenital heart defect. A procedure I'd botched. A preventable death. The leader's words echoed Thorne's mother's anguished scream. Guilt, a familiar corrosive acid, began to eat at the edges of my resolve. They were trying to weaponize my failures. "I am a surgeon," I said, the words a brittle rasp. "I save lives, I do not extract." The tremor in my voice was a betrayal. I focused on the leader's face, dissecting it with the clinical detachment I'd honed over decades. The perfect teeth, the taut skin, the vacant eyes, Beeson, all meticulously maintained, all utterly devoid of humanity. A flicker of something twinned out. Twifty crossed his features. A tiny fracture in the facade. The drums hammered, thrum, 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 thrum. But I pushed past the disorientation, dredging up another memory. Mrs. Abernathy, a woman with advanced pancreatic cancer. I'd attempted a radical resection, believing I could offer her a chance. She died on the table, her face contorted in silent agony. "You presume to understand suffering," I challenged, the words gaining strength. "You have never known true loss, true regret." The leader's grip on the scalpel tightened. The air crackled with an almost palpable tension. I saw a glimpse of the shrouded figure on the platform, its form shifting subtly, a faint pulse visible beneath the fabric. They were feeding off the energy, the fear. I needed to disrupt it. My gaze swept the cavern, cataloging the details. The phosphorescent minerals embedded in the shale, the source of the sickly green light. They were the power source, the conduit. A desperate plan formed in my mind. It was a long shot, a gamble, but it was all I had. "This mine," I said, my voice gaining resonance, "is unstable. The geological strata are compromised." I let the lie hang in the air, hoping it would sow discord. "The minerals you rely upon are volatile. Disturb them, and the entire structure could collapse." The leader's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine concern replacing the vacant serenity. He glanced at one of his robed figures, a silent communication passing between them. It was a weakness, a chink in their armor. I seized the opportunity. I lunged forward, knocking the scalpel from his hand. It clattered against the shale floor, the sound swallowed by the cavern's immensity. The drums faltered, a momentary lapse in their relentless rhythm. I kicked out, sending a scattering of surgical instruments flying, clamping clamps, retractors, a bone saw funded a chaotic barrage aimed at disrupting their formation. The cavern erupted in a flurry of movement. The robed figures reacted with surprising speed, their movements precise and coordinated. A struggle ensued, a desperate dance of evasion and attack. I dodged a grasping hand, the metallic rasp of fabric against my skin sending a shiver down my spine. The fungal light pulsed erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the cavern walls. In the chaos, I felt a sickening lurch as the chronometer slipped from my grasp. It bounced once, twice, then disappeared into the shadows, its ticking silenced. A shattering echo reverberated through the cavern, a final mournful farewell. I stumbled backward, disoriented, as a robed figure lunged at me. I managed to deflect the blow, but the impact sent a searing pain through my left arm. A sharp, burning sensation, like 1,000 needles piercing my flesh. I glanced down to see a hand, gloved in black fabric, gripping my arm with unnatural strength. The fungal light caught the glint of something metallic beneath the glove. A wire, a needle. The cavern began to spin, the coppery scent intensifying, overwhelming. The last thing I saw was the leader's face, his vacant eyes now filled with a cold, predatory satisfaction. Then, darkness. The fall wasn't far, but the shale scraped against my cheek, leaving a raw, stinging trail. Disorientation clung to me like a shroud. The cavern, moments ago a chaotic battlefield, was swallowed by an oppressive darkness, punctuated only by the faint, persistent glow emanating from the cat's mismatched eyes. It sat beside me, a silent, watchful sentinel. The coppery scent, previously a background hum, now pressed against my nostrils, thick and suffocating. I pushed myself up, limbs heavy, the pain in my arm a throbbing counterpoint to the ringing in my ears. The robed figures were gone. The drums, blessedly, were silent. I stumbled forward, hands outstretched, navigating the labyrinthine passages of the mine. Each turn revealed identical corridors effin rough, hewn shale walls, damp and slick to the touch. The phosphorescent minerals embedded within casting an unsettling, sickly green pallor. It was as if the mine itself had shifted, rearranged itself to trap me. The cat padded silently ahead, its tail a twitching beacon in the gloom. I followed, trusting its instincts more than my own. The air grew colder, heavier, each breath a laborious effort. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the tunnels, each drop a tiny hammer blow against my sanity fin drip. Drip, drip, drip. It resonated, amplified by the oppressive stillness. Then a new passage appeared. It wasn't there before. I was certain of it. The shale was smoother, the walls almost finished, a stark contrast to the raw, brutal construction of the rest of the mine. It was a corridor built for something else, something cleaner. A metallic rasp, like metal grinding against metal, echoed from within. The passage opened into a room, not a cavern, a room. Sterile, harshly lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube overhead. The walls were painted a sickly institutional green, the color leaching the vibrancy from everything it touched. A metal table dominated the center of the room, bolted to the floor. 2 chairs sat opposite each other. The air smelled of disinfectant, a desperate attempt to mask the underlying scent of copper. A figure sat in one of the chairs, tall, thin, dressed in a pristine white coat. His face was obscured by the shadows, but I could feel his gaze on me, cold and assessing. He didn't speak, didn't move, just waited. The cat, usually so silent, emitted a low, guttural growl, its fur bristling, its mismatched eyes fixed on the figure in the white coat, glowing with an unsettling intensity. The growl vibrated through the silence, a primal warning. Bronwyn Nguyen, a voice boomed, disembodied, seemingly emanating from the walls themselves. Please be seated. It was a smooth, modulated tone utterly lacking in warmth or humanity. We have questions for you. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move, to sit in the chair opposite the figure in the white coat. He remained motionless, an unnerving statue in the harsh light. The fluorescent tube above flickered violently, casting dancing shadows that distorted his features. Are you ready to testify? The disembodied voice inquired. Testify to what? My mind raced, desperately trying to piece together the fragments of memory, the disjointed events that had led me to this sterile, terrifying room, the scalpel, the leader, the cat, the escape. Was this freedom? Or a deeper level of the mine? The figure in the white coat finally moved, his hand rising to adjust his mask. A glimpse of something metallic flashed beneath the fabric. A needle? A wire? The coppery scent intensified, pressing against my lungs, choking me. Another metallic grinding sound began to build, growing louder, more insistent. I turned my head, searching for the source. Behind the figure in the white coat, a new tunnel appeared, shimmering into existence as if conjured from thin air. The shale walls were smooth, identical to the passage I'd just entered. A perfect, seamless extension of the room. The cat hissed a sharp, warning sound, its tail lashing back and forth. It stared at the new tunnel, its mismatched eyes glowing with an almost frantic intensity. The grinding sound reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that drowned out the disembodied voice. The interrogation light flickered, then died, plunging the room into near darkness.